As I've said many times today, it's good to be home. But I have a confession to make. The first time I was in Halifax in anything resembling some sort of official capacity was as the director for the premiere season of the outdoor drama First for Freedom. I was here to conduct local auditions for the show. Unfortunately for me, and anyone else who happened to be in my immediate vicinity, I was nursing the worst hangover I've ever had in my life. The night before coming to Halifax, I had unfortunately hosted a bachelor party for a dear friend in Raleigh, during which an impressive amount of alcohol had been willingly, if unwisely, consumed. Terry Mann, now a well-known Broadway star, was with me that day and suffering a similar fate. We had around 100 hopefuls to audition for the outdoor drama, so we took our place in the audience and ushered the first auditionee to the stage. His name was Seward Dickens. And Seward had an incredibly powerful voice, a very, very loud and unbelievably powerful voice. Every word he spoke, every syllable of every word he spoke resounded in my ears with the painful fierceness of a diesel train thundering through a very long tunnel with its whistle continuously blaring. I immediately raised my hand. Seward paused in his delivery, and I said in words barely above a whisper, "Thank you. You're in the show." In fact, as I recall, everyone with a loud voice was immediately put in the show that day. Ren Phillips, that includes you. Happily, we ended up with a fine cast and an equally fine production of First for Freedom. The premiere of the show actually proved to be a wonderful homecoming for me. I and the other cast members from Raleigh were put up in a few rather rustic poker huts not far from here on the banks of the Roanoke River. By using the word rustic, I mean to convey the fact that my particular cabin, among the absence of other conveniences, had no shower or bathtub. I therefore went to a nearby hardware store and bought a very large metal tub. I called it a tub, others called it a horse trough. When I wanted to submerge myself in water, which being a good Southern Baptist was fairly often, I had to heat large pots of water on the stove in order to fill that metal tub. But being back in God's country during the rehearsals for that outdoor drama, I also knew that I wanted to avail myself of the wonderful Southern dishes I had grown up enjoying in my native county. So I established a home cooking contest. The cast members from Raleigh let it be known that we would receive homemade dishes from ladies in the area. And after sampling generous helpings of potato salad, coleslaw, hush puppies, black-eyed peas, corn, butter beans, fried chicken, chocolate cake, and sweet iced tea, we would choose a winner. The contest lasted for my entire residency here in Halifax, and I gained at least 20 pounds. But I still remain grateful and happily indebted, as do so many others, to those dear contestants who became willing, albeit unknowing accomplices, in a bout of unabashed gluttony, still reverently referred to as the First for Freedom Country Cook-Off. But among these and other blessings that colored my residency here during the rehearsal period of First for Freedom, I was also afforded a unique opportunity to reacquaint myself with the fascinating history of this beautiful town and surrounding area. As you know, I was raised in Enfield, so I knew something of the stories about Huckleberry Swamp, and the names of Charles Cornwallis, Nathaniel Greene, and John Penn weren't entirely unknown to me either, but they were grouped together in a sort of gray nebulous area known to me as the War for Independence. Those of us from Enfield knew, of course, about General Lafayette visiting our town and speaking from the balcony of a home very near our school building. In fact, I passed that old house every day on my way to school. But I suppose I passed it very much like New Yorkers sometimes pass the Empire State Building. After a while, though you might not be completely unaware of its presence, you tend to eventually pass it with little particular notice. Occasionally, however, your conscious appreciation of its significance is revived. And this is what happened to me during the rehearsal period for First for Freedom. During the late summer afternoons before the evening's rehearsal or performance of the show, I'd often walk the streets of Halifax, lost in thought, wondering what it must have been like to have lived here during that turbulent chapter in our nation's history. Founded in 1760, this town had quickly become the bustling nucleus of the entire Roanoke River Valley. It was a busy river port, county seat, crossroads, and social center. In fact, by 1769, the town had nearly 60 houses and public buildings. And so as I'd walk these streets during those late summer afternoons, it wasn't difficult at all to imagine the sounds and smells that must have come from some of those historic dwellings that I passed. During those late colonial afternoons of 1776, the evening meal was most certainly being prepared, and dining room conversation must have eventually turned to the mounting problems between England and the colonies. Since Halifax was such a busy river port, news of the unrest spreading throughout the colonies was updated practically on a daily basis, and people were understandably concerned. North Carolina's 4th Provincial Congress was set to meet here in the spring of that year, and though people were aware of the prestige that came with hosting such an august assembly, there must have also been a sense of mounting dread about it all. Only 8 months earlier, North Carolina's official attitude toward independence had been rather ambivalent. Facing increasing uncertainties and dealing with the divided loyalties of its populace, the 3rd Provincial Congress had issued an address to the inhabitants of the British Empire, which actually claimed allegiance to the Crown and reiterated the colony's desire to return to the relationship that had existed between Great Britain and the American colonies in the years prior to the French and Indian War. From August 1975 to April 1976, however, the deteriorating situation in North Carolina, as well as the other colonies, changed how many North Carolinians and their delegates to the upcoming Provincial Congress meeting viewed their relationship with Great Britain. Following the battles of Lexington and Concord, King George declared the colonies to be in a state of rebellion and withdrew his protection from the colonists. In January 1776, Royal Governor Josiah Martin issued a call for Loyalist troops to assemble and rendezvous with a contingent of the British Army that was sailing for North Carolina's coast. And though Patriot soldiers had intercepted those Loyalists and soundly defeated them at the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, that skirmish sent incredible shock waves through the entire province. Who had the right to tax people? Who had the right to pass or veto laws? These questions were part of the conflict that was brewing between North Carolina's royal governor, appointed by the Crown, and the Assembly, elected by the landowners. After the governor refused to call the Assembly into session, the representatives had formed a Congress, and that Congress had assumed all governmental powers after the royal governor, Josiah Martin, fled the colony in 1775. People in the colonies had finally come to the realization that an awesome decision had to be made. They had to decide whether they would support the Congress in its growing call for independence, remain loyal to England and support the royal governor, or to simply remain neutral over the entire issue. North Carolina's Patriot leaders had, of course, come to the conclusion that reconciliation on amiable terms with England was no longer possible. Here in Halifax and the surrounding area, those mixed feelings were beginning to come to a boil, because these were not merely casual differences of opinion. It was springtime, after all, and there were crops to be planted, farms to be tended, important business to be conducted in this bustling riverport town. To have to also deal with such bitter unrest must have taken its toll on every single person who lived here. Children must have looked on in fearful confusion at the frequent arguments that most certainly erupted around dinner tables in Halifax. Women must have shed tears in sad frustration at the way friends and family were being torn apart. Tempers must have also flared among people gathered in taverns and along the loading docks of the Roanoke River. And some of those arguments most certainly must have resulted in angry men turning to physical violence in order to defend their viewpoints. I humbly suggest that it's not so very hard to imagine how political allegiances could so harshly divide families, friends, and even occasionally pit brother against brother. Because one has only to look at how politically divided our country is today to gain some bit of understanding regarding the sentiments boiling to the surface during those years of unrest in the American colonies. Now, I'm going to leave it to you to decide for yourselves whether or not President Trump might be considered an equivalent to King George, because I'm not here to start another war. But perhaps you can more hopefully understand how such strong political allegiances were causing such painful divisions between friends and families here in Halifax 242 years ago. Because you see, to break from England almost certainly meant war. Not a war fought on some foreign shore, but a war fought here in the forests and fields of the beautiful Roanoke River Basin, even here in this beautiful town of Halifax. Words would be replaced with weapons in a conflict that would most certainly mean violent death, bitter sacrifice, and prolonged destruction. A war whose outcome was not by any means assured. A war, in fact, that if lost would mean terrible retribution for the colonies. To imagine, therefore, that the delegates to the Fourth Provincial Congress simply stood bravely around a table on April 12, 1776, in order to stoically ratify words on a piece of parchment is to do serious injustice to the blood, sweat, and tears that made up that incredible wave of righteous might and unflinching determination. In order to finally make it absolutely clear that a point of no return had been reached, some entity, some group of people had to assume the awesome responsibility of making some kind of official declaration of intent. And that is just what happened here in this town 242 years ago. In spite of all the dangers that obviously faced them for taking such a bold stand, the Provincial Congress appointed a committee composed of Cornelius Harnett, Allen Jones, Thomas Burke, and Abner Nash. And they met as a committee for the first time on April the 8th, 1776, and just 4 days later, that same committee submitted a resolution to the Provincial Congress for its consideration. And this resolution became known as the Halifax Resolves. And though it was not an outright declaration of independence from Great Britain, the resolution, which was unanimously passed, became the first official action in which a colony authorized its delegates to the Continental Congress to vote for independence. The resolution was immediately copied and sent to Philadelphia, where Joseph Hughes, a member of North Carolina's delegation, shared it with the other representatives. And soon thereafter, other colonies followed North Carolina's lead, and the foundation was laid for the incredible summer of 1776, during which another document was created, the Declaration of Independence. In taking the stand they did, the 83 members of the Fourth Provincial Congress, who met here in Halifax, became heroes in the truest sense of the word. The author, Daniel James Brown, reminds us that heroes are sometimes the most ordinary seeming people. It reminds us that as ordinary as we might be, we can, if we choose, take the harder road, walk forth bravely under the indifferent stars. We can hazard the ravages of chance. We can endure what seems unendurable, and thereby open up the possibility of prevailing. We can awaken to the world as it is, and seeing it with eyes wide open, we can nevertheless embrace hope rather than despair. And that is why it is such a distinct honor to be with you this afternoon, to mark and to celebrate a moment in history that has come to define this area of North Carolina and to shape the lives of all of us who are lucky enough to call this place home. But I suggest that in a very real sense, we've not simply come together today to commemorate a remarkably brave event that took place here 242 years ago, although to do so is the very least we should undertake each and every year. But if we're wise, and I rather hope we are, we're also here to take stock of who we have become because of the actions of men and women who lived and died here so many years ago. Brave souls, some of whom sleep in the very ground beneath us. Our forefathers, who left such an indelible mark on our lives by taking the very first official stand against tyranny and injustice, by proclaiming mankind's inherent desire for liberty and freedom. The Halifax Resolves began the struggle for independence on behalf of what was to become the greatest nation on the face of this earth. And because of the actions of a few brave souls, we still have the precious freedom to occasionally disagree with each other over political issues. We've learned to actually celebrate our differences. And if you'd ever need evidence of that fact, just check out the next Duke-Carolina game. Oh, we're a stubborn people sometimes. It takes a lot to convince us to change our minds once we've made them up. After all, we've got a little tar on our heels, thank you very much. Once we take a stand, it takes a lot to uproot us. We're understandably proud of our heritage and have every right to be. That's just another reason you and I understand that the ground upon which we have assembled here today is sacred earth. And the abiding spirit which still consecrates this place we call home must never, ever be taken for granted. As another North Carolinian, Paul Green, once wrote, "Here once walked the men of dreams, the sons of hope and pain and wonder, with the light of the sun in their countenance and their lips singing a new song, a song for ages yet unborn, for us, the children who came after them. O new and mighty world to be, they sang. O land majestic, free, unbounded. Now down the trackless years that swallowed them, but not their song, we send response. Their dream still lives. It lives. It lives and shall not die. As keepers of that proud dream, it is our hopeful prayer here today that each succeeding generation may come to learn the amazing story of what happened here in Halifax all those years ago, and in turn, pass it along with loving care to the next generation, so that it may live and continue to inspire all those who come after us, even to the end of recorded time. God bless you. Thank you.